Hello everyone. Today's topic is the 10th century invasions, though as you will see, they sort of spread out around the 10th century pretty far. This period is a period of some disagreement among historians. Some people see it as a terrible crashing down of the Carolingian Renaissance and a change into sort of lawless barbarity. Other people see more continuity between the Carolingians and the 10th century. You can make up your own mind as we go along. Three different groups of people came into Europe at this time. Spanish Muslims came from North Africa in 711 and settled Spain. They're called Saracens by the people of Europe. We're going to spend a lot of time on them next class, so I'll just skip them today. The group of people who we know as the Vikings, who people in the Middle Ages referred to as the Norse or Northmen, starting in 793. And then a group of people that Einhard and other writers call Huns, who call themselves Magyar, starting in 890 and going from there. The key here is to notice in the map how the central part of Europe is under attack from three different directions at once. You can see Norwegian and Swedish Vikings coming down from the north. You can see Danish Vikings coming down from the north. They even make it so far as to make it around the tip of Spain and up into the Mediterranean. Magyars over there on your right in the purple, coming from the eastern part of Europe, formerly the steppes of Asia, and then making their way to a lot of places on the inside of Europe. Sorry about that. And then Spanish Muslims here in Spain, and then a number of different small Muslim states in North Africa who also send forces up to try to take the major Mediterranean islands. So let's talk Norsemen first. We think that these people eventually came to be called Vikings because of the word vik, which means raid. So a Viking goes Viking, he's raiding. Norse or North simply means from the north. And as I said, Viking is not a word that's used in this period. We only use it a little bit later. There are various groups that come from Denmark, Norway, and I should also have put Sweden on the slide. Their first recorded raid is in 793 at the English monastery of Lindisfarne. In this early period of the invasions, raiding is designed mainly to get plunder, but as time goes on, the Vikings also begin to set settlements into the places where they invade. So although Lindisfarne was sacked in 793, and Iona, which is another monastery, was sacked 3 times between 795 and 806, eventually the raiding turns into settlement. There are some very colorful stories about this period, and the one that I want to tell you is the story of St. Ebba, but I'm going to leave that story for class. As you probably are aware, the Vikings used waterways to get into the places where they raided, and the reason for that was because it was easy to get in fast and to get out fast again. So here's another map that shows some of the places that the Vikings are thought to have made inroads, and you can see that they are waterways. Notice that it's not just the western part of Europe that's being affected here, but also the eastern part, and even up as far as what's now Russia, which was called the Rus at this point, and all the way down to Constantinople. Here is a Viking longboat. Sorry, the picture isn't that great, but you can get an idea. They're called longboats because they're long, duh, and because they're flat. They don't take very much water to sail in. So this is particularly important when you're sailing up a river to try to do a raid. You will end up eventually running out of depth to make it possible for you to sail. But this ship can go further up rivers than most ships. Now, why did the Vikings begin to raid in the late 700s? There have been a lot of different theories about this. One, which I think is the most persuasive, is that the population in the Scandinavian countries had gotten to the point where there was very little land left to farm, and so the Vikings struck out, the Norsemen struck out to find more colonies. But that may not explain the raiding, and that may mean that there was also a sort of culture of raiding in the Scandinavian countries that eventually spread out to the rest of Europe. Okay. So as I said, the expansion is probably related to a growth in population. Eventually, starting in the 10th century, the governments began to stabilize under kings. So the King of Sweden, the King of Norway, and the King of Denmark. As those governments become more stable, the invasions turn into settlements. In 911, King Charles the Simple, one of my favorite titles here, the Simple, there's another king who's called Henry the Impotent, which is even better. He grants some land on the coast of France, which eventually becomes Normandy, and that part of France is still called Normandy, land of the Norsemen. The cities and the countryside gradually become devastated by repeated raids. So this is very serious, and it does cause some major problems, particularly in the northwestern part of Europe, where the populations just aren't equipped to respond to the raids. So this is a picture of England in the 9th century, and I want you to see, right, this is Anglo-Saxon territory down here, right? And there's a Saxon territory here. Wales is Celtic, right? And this is what's called the Danelaw, the place where the Danish settle and which is politically tied to the kings of Norway. So there is a interesting pattern of settlement here, particularly in England, and of course I already showed you Normandy. Sorry, couldn't get that out my mouth. At one point, from 1014 to 1035, that part of England was ruled not just by Danes, but by the Norwegians. So as you can see, there's a pink area here, and this is what was ruled over by a king called Knut. You can see his dates and the spelling of his name up here at the top of the map. Let's turn to talk about the Magyars. And Magyar is still the name that is given the people and the language that are spoken in what's now Hungary, what we call Hungary, place of the Huns. This is a group of people who originate in Central Asia. Einhard calls them Huns, and so a lot of the writers of that period follow suit by calling them Huns. The name probably comes from the similarity of their fighting techniques and by their origination in Central Asia. They devastated Central Europe for 60 years, starting in the 890s, until a major battle in 955 by the king of Germany, whose name was Otto. He's called Otto the Great because of this defeat. Eventually, the Magyars converted to Christianity under a king called Istvan, which means Stephen. He died in 1038 and was canonized as a saint in 1093, and settled what's now Hungary. There is a really, really cool story about this crown, which is the crown of St. Stephen of Hungary, which we'll talk about in class. And about 900, here's what the maps look like. Okay, here is the Magyar state. Sorry. My mouse is malfunctioning here. There is Magyar territory. Right? Up here are the Poles. You can see eventually that will become Poland. We have East Francia, or what we might call Germany, West Francia, or what we might call France, Burgundy of Provence, which are now parts of France. Here are the states of Al-Andalus of Spain, down here, the Christian kingdom of Leon, Asturias, up here. The age of castles begins after the invasions and after the year 1000 CE. So we can't say that castles are built in response to the invasions, but they are built in general to defend the territory against local enemies and to keep the peasantry under control. The Great Age of castle building starts in about 1000 CE and goes through until the end of the Middle Ages. Castles can belong to monasteries and to the church, as well as to knights and noblemen. And I have 3 pictures of castles here which we are going to discuss in class.